Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahushai, Bahasham Ruach HaKodesh. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And back again with another video, once again on this whole these ICE operations. And, I've been watching a couple more videos on it. One of them, you had an individual who was detained, right, or arrested, I should say, in cuffs for, I think they said about 25 minutes or so. But long story short, they were stopped, I think, while they were working with their coworker, and then the ICE agent asked for their ID, and I mean, at that point, you might as well just show it to them, right? But he was basically like, nah, I mean, why do I got to show you ID, yada yada. And the guy said, look, you look like the guy I'm looking for. If I see your ID and you're not, then cool, there's no problem. But, anyway, if he ended up in cuffs, then you can imagine that he wasn't trying to comply and he ended up in cuffs. But they ended up releasing him after checking his, doing a search on him. Anyway, there was another video where I believe it was like, it was a Congress members that showed up at an ICE facility, a detention center, and were demanding, basically access into the facility. And the agent that was there was telling them that, hey, as per, the instructions he was given, you got to basically make like I think it's like a request, to ICE and to whoever else. And I guess like there's some process that regardless of who you are, you have to go through before you can, be let in. They can't just let anybody in. And, as I'm watching the interaction, basically you had the members that wanted to get in saying, look, I'm using my congressional authority to basically tell you to let me in, and dude was like, nah. So as we're seeing these things, we're also hearing a lot more of the term unconstitutional being used. And a thought that came to my mind was, seeing the direction things are heading in and looking at how in line with prophecy they are, and looking at where this country ends up. Unconstitutional, eventually it's going to be like, so what? Right? Meaning, what I mean by that is, say Trump gives an order and, these agents are out here executing it, and you sue them, or you're saying this is unconstitutional, and they're like, okay, and we don't care. Then what? Right? Then what? Because, by saying or bringing to light, or whatever you want to call it, something like that, the Constitution is saying, hey, look, what you're doing is going against X, Y, and Z. If they just get to the point where they're like, all right, and these are the instructions we were given, so these are what we're going to follow, what do you do then? Is the question. And they're already pretty much doing that as it is. Right. So what you're seeing now is just like these random searches. There was one more I saw where you had, this one was interesting. I think it was a Chinese national, if I'm not mistaken. And it looked like he had an ankle monitor. Apparently in the video, they had an agreement with ICE. Maybe he had encountered them before, and he was going to self-deport. So yeah, he bought his ticket and everything. But one day on his way out, I don't know if he was going to the airport or where he was going, they were basically right outside his crib, right? So as the car is moving, they pull up on both sides. They stop the car. They're like, look, you got to come with us. And he's like, yo, what you mean? Like, I bought my ticket already. You guys, we already discussed. They said, listen, get out of the car or else. And then they show the warrant. They came up in there and got him up out of there. So his woman was saying that they've been holding him in a detention center, and they're not allowing him to self-deport. So he's basically there. And this is like a couple of days ago or so. So this is basically like what you're starting to see, and it's gonna get more and more like serious out here in these streets, because as I've said a couple of times already, this isn't like a post-event protest, or we're not down with these, you can't just gun us down in the streets kind of protest. This is like people are every day being affected by this. And these are citizens and non-citizens alike, right? So let me read a couple of these. I'm not going to go too deep into these articles, just want to cover a few points on here. But what you're starting to see now is fear, right? Fear is now entering people's minds as they start getting these close calls. Now, it's only going to get worse from here. The Hawashai said these are the beginning of sorrows. And compared to what was prophesied to happen, this is nothing. So instead of playing around, people better start getting right. But the thing is, rather than than acknowledging the things that they've been told and repenting, their mind goes to the far opposite when calamity comes upon them. So in other words, a lot of people are going to be cooked. Now, the first one I wanted to take a look at is in here, right? This article from Zero Hedge, it says 10 non-tax policies in Trump's mega bill that will affect Americans. And the part I wanted to focus on here was the border and immigration. So pretty much they allocated some funds to actually building a wall here, right? Single biggest item in the law is $46.5 billion dedicated to the construction of a border wall along the US-Mexico border. The next part, as it says here, much of the rest is slated for Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, the agency largely responsible for carrying out Trump's mass deportation operation. And, you know, it's, I wouldn't be surprised, right, if they grant them, or if they haven't already, those authorities that we've read many times in those FEMA executive orders, that FEMA would be able to do, right? And now you either granting them the same level or transferring those powers to ICE, or just using them as like that starter for this direction, right? Because as we always tell you, it starts with one, it leads to another, and now you're in a completely different scenario, right? Where now they're opening up labor camps, right? Now where things have gotten so bad, you have actual checkpoints, right? You have surveillance everywhere, right? You have tracking. They're gonna need a way to identify people, right? And you have troops on the streets. You have curfews in certain cities. You have even civil wars going on, right? These are things that are slated to happen, and you can see the formation of it as I go into some of these other articles. Okay, now you have whole states that are basically saying, "Nah, we're not down with this." So, like I said, now they're taking the route of, "Oh, we're gonna sue, the federal government or whatnot." But what two cases, right? What if you sue them and the court rules in their favor? Or what if you sue them and the court rules in your favor, but they're just like, okay, and so what? We still gonna do what we gotta do. Then what? When your checks and balances, as you put so much faith and trust in, or your constitution does not uphold, because now you have a transition into a dictatorship, what do you do then? See, at that point, a lot of people are gonna lose their minds. They're gonna be very, very afraid. Anyway, it says here that includes $45 billion allocated for detention through September 2029, a 365% increase over ICE's prior annual detention funding, which sat at $3.4 billion, according to the American Immigration Council. So what's interesting is that with this, they might arrest somebody, they might stop somebody, for running a red light or whatever the case is, and now you're in a ICE detention center, wondering what the hell happened. Like you're confused as hell, right? No more due process and all that. I mean, people are gonna see real soon just how fast things are changing, and at that point, people are gonna start feeling real time fear, right? And what do you do then? Who do you call upon? And that's why the scriptures say in Isaiah 30, "Woe unto you that go down to Egypt for help," because them same Egyptians are gonna turn upon you, right? The Egyptians being the modern day Americans, but here the governments that you put your trust in. The next one here is LA Mayor Karen Bass promises illegal aliens cash amid ICE raids. And this I wanted to bring this out because it is highlighting the point, right? When you have the federal government doing one thing, and you have different mayors and like governors of different states pushing against that. So there goes your tit for tat again, right? Oh, they're doing this. Okay, well, in order to counteract that, we're going to do this. We're not going to allow them to do this. We're going to do that. And eventually, what happens when words don't prevail? When, you know, lawsuits don't prevail, when judge orders don't prevail or court orders don't prevail, it's going to get physical because that's the next step. How do you make somebody do something if they're not going to comply to what you have agreed upon? That's how wars start, and wars don't always have to be between countries. They can be within countries. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass announced Friday that undocumented migrants in the city will receive prepaid cash cards funded by philanthropic donors. The program is set to begin within a week, and let's see. Yeah, it says here, she said there were migrants who don't want to leave their homes and are not going to work because they're scared. And it ain't just gonna be them. When you watch the trailer of that of a Gray State, if you just type in YouTube Gray State, right, the movie trailer, you'll see the faces that were on, people. They were all afraid. Some watching these things from their TVs, some in the streets rioting, but it's fearful times. The next one here is California, Los Angeles join activist lawsuit against federal authorities over ICE operations. And this is going to be an interesting one, right? Because when you have some of these like these suits, these cases that are heard, the outcome of that sets a precedent for similar scenarios in the future. But I'm just going to jump through and read some of the important parts. Says the lawsuit also alleges that the agencies are stripping detainees of constitutionally mandated due process and that ICE and CBP policies ignore the need for reasonable suspicion. The lawsuit also alleges the actions are in violation of the Fourth Amendment. So now your Constitution is coming into question, which is, hey, all right, so like, hey, this guy is doing things, right, putting measures in place that are going against the Constitution. What are we going to do about that? And like I gave the scenario earlier before, either way it goes, if your president is like, I'm gonna find a way around it, or it is what it is, that's the question. What do you do then? Is that then do you start to have people saying, okay, now we need to uprise against the federal government because we need to defend the Constitution, X, Y, and Z? It gets real muddy real quick, right? And in the process of that chaos, you can have a lot of destruction happen. Okay. The United States, I'm jumping around here. The United States Constitution's Supremacy Clause prohibits the city from picking and choosing which federal laws will be enforced and which will not. The United States Attorney of the Central District of California, Bill Asalee, said in a statement on the lawsuit. The lawsuit comes amid the Trump administration conducting aggressive, militaristic immigration raids in Los Angeles that have terrified immigrant and non-immigrant residents alike, chilled community members' participation in civic society, and impeded law enforcement and public safety. So, similar to what you see, like if you've ever watched the movie, it came out maybe a year or two ago, Civil War. Okay, you had once again two sides, right? They both had weapons, they both had ammunition. They were going back and forth to get into the White House to eliminate, whoever was in power there, and basically change things up. How are things gonna go here? Who knows? But what you are starting to see is some Trump supporters are now unhappy because of this whole Epstein files thing, where it's like he's trying to now basically like tell people, hey, just let it go. And they're like, I thought you said you were gonna release the files. What's up? Ain't nobody trying to let nothing go. What's in there? So you had even people burning MAGA hats, right? To people that are supposed to be supporters. The dragnet has resulted in U.S. citizens being wrongfully detained and has created a culture of fear and CV style ghost towns because people are what? Afraid. And it's as we're telling you, man, like this. So you're seeing this go on, right? But now imagine this coupled with famines. Imagine this to the point of lethal weapons being used. And what you see is a little bit of chaos goes a long way. So sometimes you have chaos that's unrelated that triggers another form of chaos that's unrelated. A city or a state starts to become destructive because you have two opposing sides going at it with each other, and it turns lethal. And then before you know it, just people just start wilding out in the streets, start robbing, start looting, because that's what happens. Start, assaulting people, breaking into places, because the focus is now on the chaos that's going on, like normal functioning things like your 911, your EMT services and all of that. It's not as it used to be. And people start taking advantage of that. And before you know it, the whole city starts going downhill very quickly. The city of Los Angeles, along with the county, cities, organizations, and Angelinos across LA, is taking the administration to court to stop its clear violation of the United States Constitution and federal law. Do you think that if they're violating this, they're not aware of that? But that doesn't seem to be stopping them. I wonder where this could possibly lead. We will not be intimidated. We are making Los Angeles the example. LA, there's a lot been going on in LA recently, right? Los Angeles, the example of how people who believe in American values will stand together and stand united. That is a civil divide, okay? You have one side, it's in 2 Ezra 15, right? One people shall stand up to fight against another with swords in their hands. So we know it's going to get violent. But you're saying here, making LA an example of how people who believe in American values will stand together and stand united. So if LA is like, we don't care what happens out of this court order, we're gonna stand for what we believe is right, which is to defend, the sanctuary, right, or people, and that's gonna be an example. Then why wouldn't other states look at that and say, well, we're gonna follow suit? If the courts won't do it, we're going to have to take matters into our own hands. What happens then? Then your whole structure and stuff falls out of place. And if you got Trump threatening already to arrest this guy, Mamdani, I think that's his name, should he become mayor, which at this point he probably basically already is, and resist, right, these operations. And don't forget, it was the same DHS, which years ago, they bought a whole bunch of hollow tip bullets. All right. Let me read this part real quick. It says in one high profile arrest on July 2nd, ICE arrested Mexican boxer Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. at his home in Studio City near Los Angeles. Chavez, who the Department of Homeland Security says entered the country illegally, is accused of being an associate of the Sinaloa cartel, which has been designated a foreign terrorist organization. Boy, is it going to get messy out here, man. I'm going to jump down here. It says, as bad faith politicians attempt to demean and vilify our brave law enforcement, we will only double down and ramp up our enforcement actions against the worst of the worst criminals. And when do you start to say, well, if you are going to impede, law enforcement, right, and you're going to side with criminals, then maybe we should look at you as a criminal or a dissident. Maybe we got to start rounding up people who are trying to intervene in this operation being done. That is authoritarian. And as it starts to get to that point, that's what it means when they start doubling down and ramping up their efforts, it will escalate. And the America you know it is going to be no more because it's in that transformation phase as part of a greater plan. Go and read the letter between Albert Pike and Mazzini about the plan for 3 world wars, and you'll see what they mention in there in terms of you know releasing the nihilist, as they called it. This is Ezekiel 7:25. Destruction cometh, and they shall seek peace, and there shall be none. Yeah, and that's the thing. We're not shocked, right? We're following the direction of prophecy, and we're seeing as it's going. We're like, okay, oh wow, okay. So this is what it actually looks like when we're with the things we were reading. But we have the faith that, hey, no matter what happens, the Lord said, right? Because we have kept His word, He will keep us. So we just continue to do what the Lord requires of us because we know He's the author of all these things. The rest of these people, hope is very slim. Because what are you going to do when you get caught up? And you better not be a fine looking chick as well, because you end up over there. What do you think is going to be happening to you? And this is why this is just the beginning of the tip of the iceberg. But these are the kinds of situations that lead into Isaiah 4:1, where people are afraid that pride is broken down. When the scriptures say the city shall be troubled, right? A man shall desire to go into a city and shall not be able. So as things get bad, you're going to have it also mentions the lack of bread. You're going to have those shortages. At the same time, you have the AI advancements, right? Also, I had this on here. Waymo takes to Philadelphia, which Waymo is, I think, a company that deals with self-driving cars. I believe that's what it is. Yep, and they're in different states, right? So now you have that being more and more of a thing. So things are moving on a lot of fronts. Anyway, verse 26, mischief shall come upon mischief. So just when you're looking for reprieve, you're thinking, okay, I need a break. Oh, Lord, please have mercy. Boom, another one. And rumor shall be upon rumor. And nowadays, rumors spread quick. All it takes is for somebody to jump on social media and do a video saying, and they could be lying their ass off. And before you know it, it's viral. People are thinking it's real. But at the same time, you have the opposite where it is real, and it's going. I saw a video yesterday as well. Now I gotta vet it to see, how authentic it is. But you had an individual saying that anybody that was that speaks anti small hat rhetoric can and will be deported. Okay, on U.S. soil, right? So now they're like making like a one size fits all, you know. It says here, then shall they seek a vision of the prophet, but the law shall perish from the priest and counsel from the ancient. See, people are going to understand why it was so crucial to listen to the words of the prophets, to listen to the warnings. They had everything to say, scoffing left and right. But when these things start coming upon the face of the earth, these terrors from the Lord, they're going to be seeking those very prophets that they persecuted. Because now they're going to see how valuable that information is. Like, yo, we need to find these men because your lives are going to be on the line. Your loved ones are going to be getting taken. You're not going to know what to do. And you're going to be seeking answers. But as it says, but the law shall perish from the priest and counsel from the ancients. The king shall mourn, and the prince shall be clothed with desolation, and the hands of the people of the land shall be troubled. I will do unto them after their ways. So you brought this upon yourself. All that wickedness you were enjoying doing, and in pride. What did you think was going to happen? Why do you think we were warning people? And according to their deserts or deserts, will I judge them, and they shall know that I am the Lord. So basically, the Lord is going to judge you according to your actions. And as it says, they're going to know that I am the Lord. People are going to know the author of this destruction when it's all said and done. And it's only going to escalate more and more and more and more and more till you're mentally, physically, spiritually exhausted. And then the worst comes upon you. So buckle up, because it's going to be a sorrowful ride. And say, unless you have Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahweh Shai, well, I don't know what to say to you. But in closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahushai, Bahasham Racha Kodash. Lord willing, you edified and informed. Shalom.